get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Friday. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, I am Bev Durgan. I'm Dean of Extension at University of Minnesota, and I am also the current chair of ECOP. So welcome again today and for our first Fridays, which is a Learning for Leaders program today. Today, we are going to be talking about workforce development, and we have a number of guests here with us today that will be talking about that topic as we look at this as a program action team within ECOP. So the first Friday event that we're having, for those of you that this is the first time joining us, it's a monthly meeting that ECOP hosts for updates about ECOP, but also for opportunities to learn about programs that are sponsored by ECOP, that are programs that we are hopefully have interest to all of you across the system. So it's for the 1862s and the 1994s deans and directors, and our 1890 extension administrators. Again, hopefully it is an update on what's happening and also professional development and an opportunity for all of us that are spread throughout the extension system to have a chance to see each other and to network a little bit. So today's conversation is talk a little bit about the calendar. Again, as I said, a workforce development and some things that are happening around the program action team within extension. And then also, we would like you, if you would, to please complete the 2-minute survey on the back. We always, at the very end of this presentation, we always want to make sure that we are providing the type of information and program that all of you are interested in. So if you would fill that out, it'd be greatly appreciated. And as always, I want to again thank Sandy for being here and helping us through the presentation and making sure that everybody and the technology is working. So again, Sandy, thank you again for all you do for ECOP. It is very much appreciated. All right. First, the calendar items. Just you should have some of these on your calendar. If you are going to Carrot Oz in March, that's in DC. Just so you know that if you haven't registered yet, Carrot is at capacity right now, and so it is going to be a very large meeting. I think everybody's very interested in getting back to Washington and talking about what's happening with the Farm Bill. Our first Friday, April 7th, will be around internationalization within extension. We'll keep you updated on what that is going to look like. PILD, April should be beautiful in Washington. So if you haven't been to PILD before, you may want to consider going with your delegation to PILD. And as always, we want to encourage all of you to submit national awards. The national awards deadline, as you can see, is May 1. Be working on those awards, get those in, and let's all try to recognize the great work that is happening in extension around the system. And one way to do that is to nominate your great extension faculty. May 5th, we also have another First Friday event scheduled that will be around non-traditional skill development. And we have been working this year with ECOP to try to strengthen the relationship with the other COPs, and that is ACOP is our academic committee on policy. So that will be a joint presentation with that COP. And then again, remember, NETA, our National Extension Directors and Administrators meeting will be in early October in Tucson, Arizona. So let's make sure that you have that on your calendar and you plan to attend. So with that, Sandy, I think that is all of our updates. But one thing I do want to do today before I turn it over to John Lawrence is to thank John Lawrence. I think many of you know that John is retiring from I'll say a very productive career at Iowa State. And so, John, I want to thank you for all you have done for the extension system, but also to thank you for your participation on ECOP. And so you have led many committees. You provided leadership for ECOP across the U.S. And I think you should be receiving this in the mail. I think Sandy has sent it to you. So again, just a small token of our appreciation for your national leadership. And also, now you have this clock from ECOP, and the best thing you can do when you look at this clock is remember your time is your time now, and you can say no to anybody you want to. Okay, so happy retirement to you, John, and we really again appreciate all your service and what you've done.
Well, thank you, Bev, and I did receive the clock, so thank you, Sandy, for getting that. I think what's time to a retired person, but it is to remind you of the memories and the friendships that I've made over the years. So again, thank all of you for joining today. A couple of things I want to touch on that Bev had mentioned is the awards. Get those nominations in. Part of the professional development committee is around the awards. We have both team and individual awards, and we want to see the best people be recognized. So please encourage your staff to get those in. Today, we are going to hear from Ivory Lyles, who's a vice provost in University Outreach and Engagement at Oregon State University and director of their extension. He's going to be joined by a couple from Missouri, a couple of people, Robert Russell and Amy Patillo at Missouri Extension, and then Clint Cummings from Tennessee Extension, talking about this workforce development. And it was mentioned that in May 5th, or excuse me, the May Learning for Leaders will be a continuation on this. So it's kind of a two-part, if you will, around workforce development and a role Extension may play in that. So Ivory, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. And let me see if I can share my slides. There we go. Today we're going to talk very briefly about and try to leave the most time to Amy and to Clint and to Bob to follow up. We've divided this conversation in three parts. I wanted to get a feel for what extension directors across the system was thinking about workforce development. And we will talk about that briefly. Then Amy and Clint will share the national assessment that was funded by NIFA that they conducted on behalf of the Extension Foundation. And so it gives us a real picture of what's in the Extension Foundation, followed by Bob, who's going to provide some real life conversation around some programs that we perceive as workforce development. I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize. The first thing we wanted to do was get a feel for what was the common definition that we use around workforce development within the extension system. And we can present that around 4 core competencies as we think about workforce development. One is around skill competency training and what is the role, or should be the role of extension in that. How do we play, what role we play in continuing learning. And then the strategic futuristic planning around workforce development and the role that extension can and should be involved in. And finally is the whole concept around the wraparound services or support for workforce development as we think about engagement and the role in that as workforce development. Workforce development is one of those areas that of the 20 plus respondents from extension directors, most if not all felt that we should be engaged in some form or fashion. What's missing though? As we think about workforce development and what the directors and administrators had to say, was that the industries and communities perspective was what was included, but it was not included in the way that it should be. We were looking more or less at the individual perspective, and as an organization, we need to think about the industry and their role in workforce development. And we also need to have a better understanding of what communities and organization is trying to address. What are the gaps? I think of that as I think about what I discovered around program developments 20 plus years ago. Extension work in that sweet spot of the difference between what is and what should be, commonly known as the need gap. And it's the same concept here around workforce development. We need to think about how do we bring new audiences in as we deal with workforce development. There's a tremendous opportunity there. I like to think of it in the state of Oregon as we should be the land-grant university for every citizen in the state, whether that's youth development or adult audiences. And then how do we effectively evaluate that? How do we track what we're doing as we think about workforce development? And this is common of what the directors had to say in this assessment. What are the areas that directors think we should and we are currently working in their states as we assess their needs around home economics institutions, or as we think about working with chambers of commerce, as we deal with state agencies, are all positive areas that we can partner with as we think about workforce development. Again, a lot of opportunities around partner development, which provides us with new opportunities and new audiences as we grow our extension program. I know in my state, as many of you may be dealing with, there's tremendous opportunity around how do we continue to serve this urban population. And this is a perfect opportunity to open that door for us in a positive way. The core, I think, will be the follow-up in May around workforce development. So what is Extension role as we think about workforce development as we move into the future? One, we need to consider for credit pathways and look at where do we start with non-credit and how we move that into the credit system through stackable credentials in the whole area that will be addressed somewhat in our May. We need to create bridges for individuals that at the current time they may be interested in one of our Master Gardeners program as a certificate program, but at some point they may think, well, I need a landscape and be more involved in understanding pesticide and chemicals. So I need some more educational training around that. They get interested and they may eventually decide, well, you know, I would love to have a horticulture degree. How do we build that bridge from the certificate that started out as a Master Gardener all the way to the credit arena? What role we play with small business development and e-commerce and trade? How do we do those programs that they need to make sure their employees get the level of certification? We had several of the directors talk about that as a workforce development program that we need to explore. The traditional 4-H, you know, how do we support youth development and career opportunity, career exploration as we go forward? Strong opportunities for us, for those of us in Extension to be involved in workforce development as we think about what the Extension directors shared with us. What are the workforce development programs that were talked about as we think about we only had 21 respondents in this. I wish I had more of the Extension directors and administrators to respond. But many, the majority talked about the need for the non-credit education. They see a ready role for Extension to be involved in that arena. We add to that, and you think about all the way up to credit education and what is the role for Extension in that as we work in collaboration across all of the colleges at your various universities. We've done quite a bit of that here in Oregon, and many of the other colleges and universities across the nation is engaging in that process as well. What should be our current effort? What is our current effort from the perspective of our directors and administrators around strengthening and expanding workforce development skills? It is around partnering with our academic units to ensure that we have current ongoing credit program, certificate programs that can readily move toward. It offers a tremendous opportunity for development and training as we think about our DEI and what we should be doing in that arena, because we can reach so many more audiences. And now with the new technologies that exist across the nation. And one that is exciting to me is the ability to partner with specific industry and develop ongoing programming for them that they need to be successful, and yet strengthen our relationship with them in our states. Offers tremendous opportunities for financial growth and development as we think about our budget situations for the future. Finally, let me close with what extension directors and administrators saw as some of the barriers, and none would be surprising to you, is the staff capacity. Do we have the current staff to address some of these new areas around workforce development? Funding, our funds are in many cases are restricted to our traditional extension programs, and as you try to break out into new program areas, where's that relevant funding going to come from? The competencies and the competing expectations of our staff, we're all overworked and stretched thin. And so that is a barrier for us taking on new program areas as we think about it. And then rather than going through all of one of the others that stood out was the administrative structure support. Are we organized in a way where we can venture into new program areas around workforce development and be successful? So just food for thought as we think about launching into workforce development and that role that we're going to play and continue to define and work through that process. I will turn it over now to the next presenter.
Hi, I'm Amy Patillo, and joining me is Clint Cummings from Tennessee. And everyone needs to be a little patient with Clint. He's having a terrible thunderstorm and he's had a lot of connectivity issues. So we hope that he can continue with us. And I'm going to turn it over to Clint. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Amy. Yes, we'll do the best we can. So thank you for this opportunity. It's really great to go right after Dr. Lyles. I think it will complement a lot of what was just said. You'll see on the screen here some of our distinguished colleagues that helped with the project over the summer for the National Extension Workforce Development Fellowship that Amy and I got to be a part of. So we're going to talk through some of our findings over the next few minutes. Thank you very much. And so our charge, if you will, we were given the task of a few different things. One, building a network and developing an extension network for workforce development. Part of that was identifying points of contact at the institutions and connecting with them and having one-on-one conversations. It was my great privilege to have many of those conversations with folks across the country, maybe some of you on here today, and learned a great deal. And part of that was to also build the connect group within the e-extension, if I'm saying that correctly. And we did that. We laid the foundation. We've got the capacity to add blog posts, to add interaction, discussion forum, and things like that, as workforce development, kind of this project continues to unfold in kind of a different phase. But we have the foundation that was laid there. Part of that was a kickoff meeting that we were able to do back in September. I think we had, it looks like 40 folks there, and really we were able to highlight a few programs that are going on across the country that are really just a taste. They're just a taste of what all is going on, and I think there's some interest in maybe replicating that and doing some of that again and highlighting other programs. One of the things that I wanted to bring to attention is as we look at this is through those peer-to-peer one-on-one contacts. I got to learn, and people in Extension are just wonderful to talk to. I could talk all day with them, and the themes that came out about both the conversations about what the institutions were doing, the programming that was being offered, and just kind of the general thoughts. They kind of coalesce around a few different areas. One would be, just the general skill development and experiential learning that all extension does and has done across the nation. And some have said, everything we do is workforce development. So part of that gets back to really the identification or the definition of what is exactly workforce development. So there's kind of the general skills development. Secondly, there's specific workforce development program that's named as such, things that, really designed for various aspects of the workforce, but they're also more general in nature, not specific to industry sector, things like that. But then there is industry training, folks who are offering programming that focus on a specific industry but with more general application. And then finally, specific occupational training. And I think that maybe what Dr. Lyles had alluded to before, where we've got the opportunity for, some contractual agreements or where there's an opportunity for, a funding fee structure, offering a service that leads to an industry recognized credential for a specific industry, and being not only offering that, but being seen as those who offer that. And so those four, and then you can see on your screen here, and I think this is where we turn it over to you, Amy, I do believe, and where you're going to lead us from here.
Thanks, Clint. So in addition to the network that Clint worked really hard to build, together, we also built the national assessment and framework for the workforce development program. We use the National Registry tool, and I dropped both of those links to the kickoff video into chat and then the National Registry into chat. And the National Registry was an existing tool that we use to identify workforce development and the related programs to workforce development across all 112 land-grant universities. And this resulted in the first national workforce framework under the guidance of the ECOP workforce PAT and the leadership team. And here's an example of that national registry and the link to get to the national registry. It's a tool that enables Cooperative Extension and other professionals to register their projects, programs, curricula, or nationwide collaborations in a tool that is accessible to all of Cooperative Extension, our stakeholders, and those that are interested in this type of programming. It helps as Extension professionals us to quickly find similar programs and efforts across Cooperative Extension, as well as helps us to reduce the duplication, and it speeds in the development of new programs to increase local impact. The database is one of the perceptions that we received during the survey was that people didn't really recognize that the programs that they were doing were workforce development. And so in communication with them and conversations, we were able to identify existing programs that were in workforce development, but in other program areas that could contribute to the work. And we currently are at 109 programs in the National Registry. And here's an example of those who responded and have put the programs in the National Registry. So Clint had several additional conversations with individuals who will be working on putting their information into the registry. Other organizations and institutions felt like their information was currently under development and it wasn't quite ready to go into the registry. But if you have programs that you would like to enter, there are far more opportunities in program areas besides workforce development. And we do encourage you to enter those and share your tools and resources with the rest of Cooperative Extension. We had 32 of 52 states that responded by entering information in workforce development in their programs. And there were several multi-state programs that are currently being implemented that aren't reflected in this, but it's really hard for us to pull all of those out. So I encourage you to go into the National Registry, see what's currently happening, and see what you can contribute. And I'm going to turn it back over to Clint to share the takeaways and what we learned from this program. And then Rob Russell will follow up with some of the examples that are in the National Registry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. And so part of what came out of both of the one-on-one individual conversations, I think also the kickoff event, and then looking at the National Registry, kind of, and you'll see this in the report. There's a report, and I think that Rob will will allude to that. And the themes that we saw coming out of this work and the conversations is that, theme one, workforce development is not very well defined in extension. I think we all probably could agree with that to some extent, that extension is providing a wide range of programming, but it's not all identified as such. Part of that, the danger there, or the missed opportunities that there is this an identity. If we ourselves don't recognize ourselves as a provider of workforce development, we couldn't expect others outside to recognize us as such either. So that's maybe an opportunity for us. Workforce development is happening, but it's not necessarily, called workforce development. Some places we heard that workforce development is just not happening, and I do appreciate the transparency there. It's just not part of what the focus is or has been. Doesn't mean it can't be or won't be. It's just not really not being pushed at the moment. But many saw extension as, yes, we could be a player. We are well positioned. We have the connections. We have the ability. Do we have? Are we there yet? And I do want to acknowledge as well that there are several who are thriving. Several who are really, that they have workforce development very well recognized across the country as such. And they are doing well. A caveat to that, or anecdote, is I did ask one of them, and I won't name the names, but I did ask one of the on one of the interviews, what sets you apart? What helps you all be so progressive and so ahead of what seems like ahead of the curve on workforce development at your institution? And the answer was, it's really just, and I was actually there were two people on that call, and the answer came back as well. It's really just us. Like, nobody else is doing it. They didn't feel like maybe they had a ton of support with leadership, or it was something that was necessarily well developed and integrated, but the people on the call really saw. So I think what we'll also see is that there are people at institutions who are maybe the leaders, obviously those who were identified for this project, but maybe not everybody at the institution. So I think there's a lot of work to do, a lot of opportunities with this, and we're both glad to have been a part. So I will turn this over to Rob Russell, and he's going to conclude or take the next part of our section of the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Clint. All right, you all hopefully are seeing the slideshow here. So what were some examples of typical programs that we saw in extension through the National Registry? As Amy mentioned, there are currently 109 programs that are in the National Registry, ranging across a wide spectrum of different areas. And so what did we see here? And a couple of things that we saw. First of all, I'm trying to group these into different areas. We saw programs that are focused on skill building or credentialing through extension. And I'm going to break those down into two different areas. First of all, skill building programs that are providing broad skills that are relevant to a number of different employers or a number of different industries. And one example of this is the Remote Online Initiative from Utah State University that is being replicated through affiliates in about 6 or 7 other extension systems across the country. This is a program that's designed to provide specialized remote work training to individuals for success in a rapidly changing economy. They've grown the program to include 5 different tracks, including what they started with, which is a certified remote work professional, but they are now moving into helping supervisors who have folks that work remotely, and how do you work in that? What are the skills for success for folks in the remote job search? How do we work in e-commerce for rural business, and how do we provide college and career readiness for folks through 4-H and remote skills here? So we see programs that, again, sort of broaden, and it's not just the biggest one is Utah State, but there are a number of states that are doing different programs related to particularly the digital economy and providing skills for people who are otherwise have not had experience using the technologies to communicate widely and to work widely through a remote environment. The second sort of skill building or credentialing area that we see, again, very similar in that it provides certificates or micro-credentials or something like that that can be used even though we don't really know what those terms mean. And if you read Inside Higher Ed, there's actually an article today about the confusion over the term micro-credentials and credentialing. But there are a bunch of programs in the registry that really kind of focus on particular niches overall. And that's either focusing on specific industries or specific professions. And one example of this that we found is that Cornell University Extension has their Agricultural Supervisory Leadership Certificate program, which helps farm supervisors and managers learn and apply human resource management practices and leadership skills through their operations there. It's a 6-course program. Each course is comprised of 5 to 6 weeks of instruction, and it includes things such as how do you transition to being a supervisor, how do you manage performance, how do you staff and organize your team, what does employee development and training look like, and other areas like that. And upon completion of all 6 courses, and those people who achieve a 70% or better completion score on all their weekly quizzes, you actually receive a certificate from Cornell Extension that an agricultural supervisory leadership that you can take to your employer there. And we saw a lot of different programs over a whole lot of different areas that are very similar to these types of ideas, ranging from UC having a University of California having a naturalist certification course or a climate steward certification also. One of the ones that was more interesting, I thought, in the registry was Oregon State has their GORP training program, which is Guide and Outdoor Recognized Professional Training. We have things related to food systems, a lot of different agricultural programs and those sort of areas, but a lot of different areas, again, kind of in specific targeted industries or specific types of professions that are providing certifications that are presumably recognized by employers in those areas, and then helping people achieve that certification there. The other sort of main track that we saw programs in, though, instead of providing credentials or skill building, is what I'm calling community-focused efforts or building pipelines. And so we're not looking at workforce development in this sort of space as training that gets you a credential that you can then take to an employer, and it either helps you move forward in your career, get access to a certain career or something like that, but really kind of focusing on how do we build pipelines, how do we help communities set the infrastructure in place so that they can tackle the workforce issues that they are facing in different ways. I know that in the middle part of the country, at least, one of the more significant issues that we have from a workforce development issue is a simple population demographic transition that is occurring. That means that we have a lot of baby boomers leaving the workforce, and the folks that are coming in at working age are at a smaller population number. And how do we then at a community level start to tackle these issues and to build the workforce that's needed to support our employers? And so one example of this here actually was just released in January, and it comes from a partnership between the APLU and Sheila Martin there, along with the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, and involved about 6 different extension programs across the country, from Oregon State to Illinois to Purdue, Utah State, and Missouri and Nebraska. And this program was piloted in Indiana, excuse me, and Arkansas, excuse me, with the purpose of helping develop a curriculum that helps cooperative education professionals build their capacities to serve as facilitators of workforce solutions in rural communities. So through this program, they worked on, excuse me, developing key partnerships, looking at needs and assets, mapping pathways, and other things like that. Finally, we're seeing efforts of building pipelines focused on how do we help navigate people into different careers that are in demand. And one example of this that is emerging is what we're calling the Missouri Manufacturing Academy, which is a long-term intervention designed to start at middle school age students and help introduce them to the many jobs and careers that are available in Missouri's manufacturers here. And we're taking this as a 6-week program through the after-school space that includes a field trip to experience a manufacturing facility, with the idea of helping people understand what careers there are in manufacturing. And that is ranging from everything from frontline production sort of jobs to plant managers to engineers to in Missouri chemists and other areas, but it's designed to really demystify manufacturing as an employment space for folks here. And we're going to expand this over time to extend the program to high school students to help them really think about how to enter, to give them mentorship in terms of entering educational programs, training programs, or the manufacturing workforce. And this is a partnership not only between MU Extension, but with one of our sister institutions in the state, Missouri University of Science and Technology, which has been received a $300 million gift about 4 years ago to establish the Kummerer Center for STEM Education and the Kummerer Institute for Advanced Manufacturing. So utilizing the cool toys and tools that they have there to build interest. But we've also partnered with the Missouri After School Network, which helps provide curricula and training to folks in the after school space. 4-H has been involved in writing the curricula. And then we have an industry partner in Brewer Science, which is a global manufacturer headquartered in Missouri that works on chemical coatings, which are used in microchips. And so again, an example to help build a pipeline here that is not a credential that someone's going to have, but it's about how do we help build that awareness of the different career possibilities that are available. The other areas that we saw that would come up, we didn't see as many programs in this though, but I want to mention are also the what I would call the wraparound services types of activities or areas that support employers. One of the great examples is actually the program that Clint has in Tennessee, which is Skill Up Tennessee. And then we have a lot of work. We have some work going on about how do we help communicate more widely about the workforce challenges that we are facing across the country here. So thank you. I will turn things back over to Dr. Lyles then.
You can see the amazing work that the PAT has done in such a short period of time, and yet there's times we do not feel that we are organized in a way to continue this effort across the entire system. And so we continue to work around what that strategic plan look like for the future. I look forward to engaging each and every one of you in this conversation as we go forward. I'm assuming we're now open for questions. We was asked to leave ample time for questions.
Thanks, Ivory, and to your team. So now we have some time for questions. So you go ahead and speak up or put them in the chat box, and we'll try to monitor that. I'll kick things off as you, I know, Ivory, you've been working some with this group that's preparing for the May 5th Learning for Leaders. How do these, what's the connection between these two?
What I wanted to do in today's presentation, since I'm working with the group in the future and Damona under her leadership, was to paint a picture of what currently exists. Not much of the focus today was on where do we go next. And as I think about it, the May 5th, and Damona, please speak up, we'll focus a lot on possibilities for the future, from non-credit to working with youth, working with various audiences and other things. And there may need to be a step after that at some point, once we see these two connections of what the possibility exists.
Okay, thank you. Question, you were concerned about the low response rate. If people are on the call that would still like to contribute to that, is that survey still open, or are you kind of closed it for the time being?
The IT unit has pulled it, but if there was a need, if we had a more robust response rate, we could get better data. I would love to know what every director or their designee in the entire system thought about workforce development. It would be great if we had everyone responding. And so we could very easily reopen that to try to get that type of response.
Other questions for the group or comments?
Could we have a little bit of a sneak peek from Damona about what we can expect on the May 5th?
Sure. So I want to give credit to Al Wasaki, because he was the one who reached out to me to say, how are we going to build on the conversation that we had last summer at our Joint COPS meeting in DC. And so we're going to feature some contributions and programs that are, I'd say, underway at different institutions. So both the University of New Hampshire, because of some credentialing things that they're doing there, as well as for credit college things. So some of the pipeline kinds of things that have been mentioned. And then there's going to be some other things that I think Ivory and team at Oregon State are going to feature. So again, the idea is to think about collaborations that go beyond maybe traditional things like we've done jointly with internships and those sorts of things, to looking at micro-credentialing, to looking at the stackable things that have been mentioned and so on. And I'm not an expert in this area. So this is, I describe us as, you know, we've dipped our toe maybe in some things. That's certainly a conversation that's being advanced at our university level in a variety of ways, because we have a new president that's very focused on expanding extensions impact in a variety of ways. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation, learning from others.
Thanks, Damona. And I see there's a question about, will the slides be available? And Sandy, you responded that you would get in touch with the presenters and collect those. I understand that this was recorded as well, so the entire presentation discussion will be available at some point also. One other question around the workforce development, and probably a very parochial view of things, but we have vocational colleges and community colleges in our state that have carved out a pretty good niche around some of the trades and some of the workforce development. How is Extension partnering with or working alongside of these more traditional view of the workforce development? Or maybe how do you differentiate yourselves so you don't have legislators saying, well, we're already paying one group, why would we pay you to do this?
I can speak from the director perspective. I cannot speak from the research. I have not reviewed that. It's under review now here in the state of Oregon. We're developing a white papers around those things. We are in close collaboration with 3 of our community colleges. And so I've asked the staff, you know, why is it that those 3 colleges want to work with us? We have 17 in the state. And so now we're interviewing the other community colleges to say, what services does Extension provide that you deem as beneficial to you? And Jeff Sherman is leading that effort. And from that, he's developing this white paper around what should be Extension relationship as we serve as the backbone for community colleges to connect in the workforce development arena. We recognize that the strength we bring to the table may not be traditional skills around workforce development as much as it could be economic development around workforce development, because we add value with that 4-year degree and so forth. So how do we partner? And so it's hopefully shortly we'll have more data to share in that arena.
And I would love to, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Laws.
I just happen to think out that there may be one other point. Once we finish these 2, there may be an opportunity, or should be an opportunity, for us to talk about what are there 2 or 3 examples we should implement across the entire system around workforce development. What are those 1 or 2 areas? Is it something that we can show from certificate all the way through what that looked like, so that we have a real true example in maybe just 1 or 2 areas? Just food for thought for us to think about for the future.
And I'd like to share just briefly, because it's so close to what we do through Skill Up Tennessee. What we do is an extension program. We recruit folks who are receiving SNAP benefits. That's the term for modern term for food stamps. And we partner with, so we would partner with a community agency out, because Extension, I mean, we are networked, right, within our communities, serving the lower income audience, and we connect with those individuals. But when they come to us, we don't provide the training ourselves, because it's skill-based and it's leading to industry recognized credentials. We partner with exactly the vocational, we call them the Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology, the TCATs, and the community colleges, some private or not other nonprofit, like for instance, Goodwill offers a CNA training. Truck driving is pretty popular from a private provider perspective, but we connect with those institutions. We like working with the state schools best, and they're the ones who provide the credentials. They're the ones who provide the training, prepare the individual to sit for the test leading to certification. What we do is we provide case management, and we're able with our funding model to come alongside and provide supportive services. So we are like a last dollar. So if they have Pell Grant that pays, $2,000 out of $2,500, we look at that additional $500, and we're able to help folks with those funds through a partnership with our Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development. It's called SNAP Employment and Training. Every state has it. Untapped potential. I mean, there's a lot of potential, and I'll just let you know that the provider of that is pretty interested in extension and is pretty interested in, would be very open to exploring these sorts of conversations in other places.
Thank you. Other questions for the presenters? Or other examples you'd like to share?
This is Mike Gutter. Sorry, I'm a little late. And if you covered this, Clint and others, feel free to kind of skip over it. I wondered if you all could comment on strategies or challenges. In certain states, there's mandated entities that need to be involved in workforce development projects, just because of the way funding flows through those states. I think it was Career Source in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. And that was one of the things we kind of ran into, is that some of the projects we wanted to do that would go larger scale needed to really be in conjunction with some of those entities. I don't know that other states have that problem, and I'm still learning more about Virginia, Clint, but I figured some others might have some of those. I don't know if you'd call them political frictions, but some sort of, those kind of systemic frictions. And if you all have any advice for that. Thanks.
Great question. Turf and boundaries, lanes, there's all kinds of politically correct terms to talk about the roles that we have been in, and we and our other public colleagues, but an important question.
Mike, I will add briefly to that. As we venture into more and more non-traditional areas, I am seriously considering bringing on my own governmental relations person to develop those types of relationships, so that because our overall university people does not have the time to devote to those type relationships that we need developed just in our engagement unit.
I'll jump in on that question. I think it's an important question, and some folks have heard me share the story of when Missouri started our workforce development program. About 6 months later, I had a meeting with the head of the state public workforce system, where we were encouraged to be collaborative and find areas that were not overlapping with what was already happening in the system there. And it took a lot of work, about 3 or 4 years worth of intentional work on our part, to build relationships, to talk about how we could collaborate and to get that to happen. And so I think that's something to be very cognizant of. I had another community, to your question, John, I had a community college leader at one point in time. We were talking about a potential partnership and expressed a worry that the land grant was going to come in and take what they do. And in Missouri, the community college system is decentralized, like most of the other institutions in our state. So they have turf wars themselves over where they serve and that sort of stuff. So it gets very complicated. And so that relationship building component is, to your question, Mike, I think is an integral part of that, and particularly in situations where land grants may have not been having a great relationship with some of those institutions, then we have to spend some time building that relationship for it to happen. So
that's really helpful, guys. Thank you for that.
And I'll say WIOA money, which is federal money that supports workforce development programs, is almost all earmarked for community college systems, at least in Missouri. And so building those relationships. There's a financial reason that they are concerned about us, concerned about land grants moving into that, because they fund a whole lot of infrastructure off of that funding stream. So.
And just to add, where we found success is certainly helping Department of Labor to fulfill their mission. Everybody knows from the beginning, we're not competing. We don't do what they do. We want to help them, move their vision down the road, which the governor is behind. And I think that's gotten us a lot of traction as well.
I
One
want to
thing-
follow up on Clint's comment because I'm not as generous in Oregon. It is becoming more difficult for us to take on projects that we're not receiving funding for. I found that if we're willing to do it without seeking funding, they're more than willing for us. It is when the competition for funding exists that there's a problem in my state.
I just wanted to mention at the University of Minnesota, we're also looking at our own workforce development. Where are our extension professionals are coming from? And we have to remember that our extension professionals, many of them are outstate in rural communities, and that's part of building those rural communities. So we've been very successful in finding funding for internships and also for graduate students. Many of the students now that we see at the University of Minnesota want to work in areas where they can make a difference, where they're actually working in communities. So attracting graduate students and undergraduates to work with our extension programs, and then hopefully we can hire them for our own workforce. And so I think I've talked to many of you that you're facing that too, is that, where are our next extension professionals coming to? And I think we have to look at that. And that is working with our other colleges. We traditionally work with our colleges of agriculture, but many of the other colleges, we have opportunities of bringing those bright professionals into extension too.
Yeah, great point, Bev. There's some good discussion going on in the chat. One in particular, Amy had posted in there the link to this registry. So as you saw the things they talked about today, if it reminded you of some things that you can enter as examples, please do so. So copy that link and continue to contribute to that database and visit that database to learn what others are doing.
I know we need to leave time, John, for the survey, but I want to encourage all of the states that may or may not have individuals participating with the PAT to register individuals to the PAT. We're restructuring that. So get someone on your staff, yourself, involved with the group as we try to figure out the next steps for the extension system around workforce development.
Thanks, Ivory. So I think we will wrap things up. Sandy will be sending you a link here to do the survey. Speaking from the Professional Development Committee, please fill that out, because that'll provide insight on what we're doing well and also ways we can improve. Also, I haven't seen the survey, but if there's a place to put in a topic that you would like to see on these First Friday or the Learning for Leaders, please include that as well. So with that, please fill out the survey. Good luck to you. Thanks for all the clock and all the kind comments. So take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you again for all the members of the PAT for being here today, and Ivory for your work on leadership with that. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.